So, I'm not sold on Sword and Shield. Sun and Moon were really disappointing after the fun time I had with Pokemon X and Alpha Sapphire. Perhaps the truth is I've simply grown old, and I'm not really sure about that. But if it actually happens that I am over Pokemon, then I decided I'm sharing the pain with everyone, and I'm gonna do it with facts. Here's a list of top 10 Pokemon you'll be glad don't exist. First off, here are the rules that my list will be going by. Number 1, no legendaries. Legendary Pokemon are extremely rare in all sources, from games to the anime. They'd be far too easy to pick from given how powerful they are. They are considered legends after all. This list is more interested in looking at how more mundane, common Pokemon that would easily ruin your day. Rule number 2. This list assumes Pokemon exist, but not other elements like Pokeballs or the unusual technology found in the Pokemon world. And we couldn't tame them as they act more like wild animals with superpowers. Rule number 3. We shall assume the Pokedex is telling the truth, even though it is likely exaggerating in a manner that would appeal to that of a younger child. This might cause some mild contradictions later on, but I'll try to explain my points when I reach them. Number 10. Rotom. The Pokedex states that it is known to enter electrical devices and wreak havoc. It's sort of like a bad virus, though perhaps humans could manufacture some sort of protection that forces it out of the device so it could be captured, and in the Pokemon world, it has been combined with the Pokedex to become a helpful guide. The Rotom inside has been tamed. That puts this low on the list, but considering how reliant we are on electrical devices, I don't see this Pokemon being exactly welcome. Haunter. It can turn invisible and phase through walls. So when, not if, when it licks you, you will shiver for the rest of your life. Goodbye any require that requires a steady hand. Not to mention, if it evolves into a Gengar, it might turn you into a ghost. Because he wants a friend. Number 8 is the cop-out. Sure, I have an image of Pyro on the screen, but honestly, that's just because I was intimidated by the fact that its breath can allegedly reach 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. But that's not really much, and it's hard to rate the danger of various fire types as the Pokemon tends to use exaggerated numbers. I could really just cop out and just say animals with the power to set things on fire could easily be lumped into one huge category, considering the danger that fire poses to most of civilization. But sometimes it is fun to look at the highlights. For example, Magcargo has a body temperature of 18,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which, for those of you who don't know, is twice as hot as the surface of the sun. Given such a ludicrously high number, most people like to joke around about Magcargo being able to incinerate the entire planet by existing. Rationally speaking, considering how it's glowing a red color and its body is implied to be of a liquid, I assume that maybe that's merely its core temperature and the temperature on the exterior is much cooler. But honestly, a giant slug the size of a dog with such a ludicrously high temperature presumably would cause some form of damage, and you probably would have to stay a couple blocks away if you didn't want to get incinerated. Meanwhile, there's Charizard, which has the ability to melt boulders and cause forest fires. The Pokedex, however, will also claim that it won't use its fire breath on a weaker foe, but that didn't really stop Ash's Charizard from doing it. Number 7. We have Beedrill. This is a very simple thing. Many people are scared of bees, and considering how many people are allergic to bees, that's a rational fear. There's also the varieties of bees that are extremely aggressive. Some people are terrified of Japanese hornets, which are quite large at 1.5 inches. However, Beedrill is a 3-foot tall bee with 3 stingers, is as aggressive as bees come, and there's hundreds of them. Many times the Pokemon mentions the dangers that Houndoom brings. Now, some of you who might know statistics know that it's a common fact that people are hurt more by dogs than by sharks. That's because we live with more dogs, so presumably Houndoom is more common than some of the more terrifying Pokemon we see out there, considering how it's modeled after a pet dog. The problem I have with this is that the Pokédex also states that Houndoom's breath is so incredibly hot that anyone burned by the flames is burned forever. That is terrifying of a consequence when you consider that this is an irreversible consequence. I know I already said fire types are scary, but this is a whole nother level. It gets its own spot. Number 5 is Castform, but he's mostly there to represent the Pokemon that can change the weather, whether it be through moves like Rain Dance or through abilities like Drought. And sure, Groudon and Kyogre can do this too, and they're much more exaggerated considering that their powers seem to change the weather for the entire region. However, that doesn't change the fact that this is a very erratic change in weather. Imagine it's the middle of summer, you're crossing a block, and suddenly it's raining hail. All because some prankster thought it would be really funny to do so. We know in the Pokemon universe, Castform can be used to manipulate the weather on a whim, as both Team Aqua and Team Magma from those games try to do so. However, it is possible that powers like this simply wouldn't work in our world. But if they do, I can easily imagine Politoed being very much illegal. Number 4 belongs to Pidgeot. The Pokédex states Pidgeot is capable of reaching speeds at Mach 2. In our world, the fastest speed of a bird belongs to the Peregrine Falcon, which is 390 kilometers an hour. It does this by utilizing a specialized diving maneuver, minimizing its air resistance and taking gravity into account. Pidgeot, however, can cause a sonic boom, which some of you may know creates a large shockwave that can potentially shatter glass. I'm fully aware jet planes don't do this, but jet planes also are required to stay a certain level above buildings. They also don't do so immediately, which I'm led to believe Pidgeot can do. Imagine a Pidgeot nestled close to a building. If it took off at max speed, it would shatter every window. Not only this, but if a Pidgeot were to collide with a human aircraft like a plane, the giant bird would likely cause enough damage to crash it. Think about how useful planes are in our everyday world. Well, we actually lose a handful of planes due to birds getting caught in the engines. In this scenario, planes don't exist because Pidgeots have destroyed them and outspeed them at speeds of Mach 2. Number 3. And at this point, we're getting to Pokemon that are so terrifyingly dangerous, you would hope they never come to where you live. You wouldn't want to get close to them. In this case, we have Magnezone. Magnezone has 2 good reasons for existing on this list. For one, the Pokédex states it uses its electronic abilities to use a radar to monitor its territory, and any intruders that come in are hunted down with precision. Its weapon of choice, according to the Pokédex, is a Hyper Beam, presumably after locking onto the target. Second, let's say a Magnezone does enter a human city. What do magnets do to electronic devices? And unlike the Rotom I mentioned earlier, it could probably short out all electronic devices by simply being close to them. And it's really hard to make such a thing go away when it has the aforementioned Hyper Beam. The fact that it can destroy most of the things we rely on our everyday basis makes this a particularly upsetting Pokemon. The second slot goes to Larvatarr. This is an unusual entry for some, but some of you may have noticed that its Pokédex entry states that it likes to eat a mountain's worth of soil before it evolves. This may seem strange, but then you realize the danger of this. Because assuming soil is the healthy topsoil and not just any bit of dirt it can get its mouth around, that means that its best target is going to be tilled farmland. Farmland being the stuff that humans need to mass produce crops. This is an innate problem, considering that human beings have built societies based around farms that mass produce food so we can have surpluses. These surpluses help humans get by during the winter when it's impossible to grow crops. This would force humans back to an age where they have to scavenge for food and have to manage whatever they can. There's another problem though, and that's even if these human societies manage to survive the winter, scrounging what they can with no ability to mass produce food or store it for winter. And that's the fact that after the Larvatarr has devastated the landfall, one winter later, it'll evolve into a Tyranitar. And now it has a sandstorm with it. Isn't that nice? As you may have noticed, this list has talked about several things that could be very upsetting to think about. Giant hornets that would make anyone afraid of insect never want to leave the house. Fire Pokemon that can incinerate everything within a 5-mile block just by existing. I even suggested the idea of ghosts that will stalk you and ruin your life. And of course slots 3 and 2 were the idea of a Pokemon so terrifying it'd be more akin to that of a horror movie. So, what would be number 1? I already said no legendary, so I couldn't pick something particularly bad. But I had to find a Pokemon that was somewhat common and whose whole existence was hateful. It knows nothing but hatred and anger. Something that's only wishes to cause suffering in this world. Well, it isn't actually too hard to find if you know where to look. With that, I give you number 1. Gyarados. Gyarados, when angered, was believed to destroy ancient cities with a hyper beam. It would become so angry, it would never stop until the entire village was burned to ashes. This Pokemon does not know empathy. It does not know kindness. Every entry talks about how unstable it is and how angry it becomes. It creates storms, it sets fire, and it does not have mercy in its heart. I'm going to remind you of a small bit of human history. There was a belief that people did not go into the open sea because there was a fear of sea monsters. That's what kept them near the edges of the continents. Of course, this wasn't true, and there probably were plenty of real reasons why they didn't go into the ocean. But there's something I want you to consider. Imagine all those horror stories are real. And now, anyone going into the sea knows that it's not superstition. There's a monster out there. It's real. And it's hungry.